All right. Well, we are here with the honor and privilege of sitting with Jenna Bush Hager. Jenna, it is such a privilege to have you on the show today. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank y'all for having me.
So we have a Southern bond, obviously, you being a Texan girl. And we came across your book, and gosh, we have so much in common. It almost feels unfair that we know so much about you and your family, and you don't know much about us, but we'll, where appropriate, we might connect some dots today, just from the way that your upbringing, aside from the White House years, has been so similar to ours. So we first really learned about you and your beautiful sister through Sisters First. Hold on just a second. We first learned about you and your beautiful sister through Sisters First. I actually read the book just this year. This is my reading stack here of books that I've completed this year, which I'm really proud of. Reading has to be made a priority, right?
Yes.
And so, gosh, there was just so many lines even in that book that I was like, did I live through the exact same era as Jenna and Barbara? And we feel like such close in age. And sure enough, I did look it up. We're about a month apart in age.
Oh, wow.
So it's funny to even read some of your stories. But we are here to talk about Jenna's new book, Everything Beautiful in Its Time. It's a personal collection of stories focusing on your family, specifically the 3 grandparents that you lost in the duration of just about a 13-month period. And so I will say, from a personal standpoint, for Lainey and I, for not having the opportunity to know our 2 grandfathers, this book really blessed us.
Oh, thank you.
You're a really personal writer, and I love the inclusion of letters in the book. That is just so intimate for you to include. So I'm very thankful for all the tender moments that you were able to do. Lainey is definitely a letter writer. She wrote letters to me when she was in college, and then when I was in college, and then from travels. And so I'd love for you just to talk a bit about just letter writing and some of the impact that that's had on you.
Well, thank y'all so much for having me. My grandparents on both sides wrote letters. I mean, I think any of us that had grandparents that were away at World War II, it was how they communicated. And in fact, on both sides, and my grandmother, Jenna and Harold, whom nobody knows, from Midland, Texas, their letters got lost. Harold's letters were, we had Harold's letters that my grandmother kept, but all of her letters got lost. And so we don't have that. We don't have their letters of love during the war, although we do have this beautiful picture of my grandmother Jenna in a bathtub, posing in a slightly provocative way, as that she got her roommate took so that she could send it to him during World War II. But that's how our grandparents communicated. The love letters between my grandfather and grandmother George and Barbara are the most beautiful and probably the most cherished item that we have, because they are letters of devotion and love before, and they were really young. My grandpa was just out of high school when he was a naval aviator in World War II. But that's how we communicated as a family. And they continued to write letters to us. And in fact, my grandmother wrote up until really she died. I received a letter from her just a couple weeks before she passed away. And why I think it's so important is, one, you're telling people that you love them in written form for them to always have. Yeah. And so now I have these letters that are precious gifts, and I know it's a form of, that could be on a way to extinction, and I hope it's not. I write letters to my girls, some of which are really just diary entries about the stage of life that we're in. They're for me as much as they are for them, but I hope that it's something that they will look back on, when they're my age and having girls or kids of their own, and think like, oh my gosh, that's how much she cared. That's her devotion. And we can read about the moments, particular snapshots of time that they were in. So I just think it's for me, those pieces of paper with their handwriting. I mean, I know what my grandparents' handwriting looks like. I remember it. If I close my eyes right now, I can think of how they signed Ganny and Gampy, and that to me is precious.
That is so beautiful. Well, I really appreciate you sitting with us today. And it reminds me actually of a story in the book that your Ganny, which was Barbara Bush, for those that don't know the name Ganny, when she really encouraged you about taking the interview, always taking the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just appreciate you sitting with us today. Who knows what's going to come of this time and what listener needed to hear from you today.
And you know, it's so funny because what I realized when you were talking about your grandparents, what I realize now, I mean, not even when I was writing this book, is how truly fortunate I was to have my grandparents for so long.
Yes.
And that I ended up having all these mini relationships with particularly my dad's parents, because they both lived until I was in my mid-30s. And so I had all these iterations of relationships with them. They saw me and I saw them as a little girl that they read to, that they reprimanded, that they, you know, had these little moments that I lit the Christmas tree at the National Mall with my grandmother in our sweatshirts with Christmas balls on it. You know, we had the childhood memories. And then later as a teen, you know, more reprimanding. And then they got to see me walk down the aisle. They read at my wedding. They saw who I married. They loved who I married.
Aww.
Then they saw me become a parent, and my girls know Great Gampy and Great Ganny. And I don't think it took me until talking about this book with so many people who said, you know, I never knew my grandparents. Mm-hmm. And no matter what, if you knew them or you didn't, there is this relationship, even with the people you never knew, because they are so much part of your family, of the fabric of your family today. And so I just don't even know if I appreciated how significant they were in my life.
Well, and I feel like that is an encouragement in reading this book, whether you knew your grandparents or whether you didn't. These stories are going to bless you. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you saying that. They are a part of our fabric of our family, mm-hmm. whether you knew them or whether you didn't. Mm-hmm. But you do have some special, special moments, just tender moments that you share. Even I loved the story of when you were considering taking that job, which we're also glad you did, the Today Show. And your grandfather sitting down with you to watch an episode that day. And then mm-hmm. not only doing that, but going to the movies with you that same day.
Yeah, well, this is like actually sort of a PSA, which is do not see inappropriate films with your grandparents or your children. Really that kind of 7th grade person that's watching, you know, like a sex scene with your parents comes back, even in your 30s, you're like, why are we doing this? But yeah, I was a teacher and I loved teaching, and I got the opportunity to come work at the Today Show. And I said, you know what? No, I'm going to continue teaching. And I went to visit my grandparents, and I told them, you know, I got it. This executive producer keeps emailing and calling and seeing if it was something I would do. And I love to teach. And the truth is, and I think we all know this now more than ever, teaching is extremely difficult, particularly in marginalized areas. I was teaching in West Baltimore, and we went through several principals in a year, and I was exhausted. And so my husband was like, well, you know, think about taking the job. The interview, what's the worst that can happen? And I went to see my grandparents, and my grandmother was like, you always take the interview, you know, you try it. And I think it's interesting because people, I think, see her as a throwback, as a woman who would maybe not encourage her granddaughter to work, but she did. She was such a force in our life. And I'm not sure that was the exact, you know, maybe it was because of speeches she gave or words she said that people see her that way. Maybe it's because of the way she looked. But really, she was a modern woman. And so she said, always take the interview. And then my grandfather said, well, now, have you seen the show? And I said, well, no, I'm a teacher. I get to school at 7 a.m. before the show's even started. So he said, well, let's turn it on. And this was 6 a.m. They got up early. I get up early. We turned on the TV and we watched the show together. And in one of the segments, Sacha Baron Cohen, who was playing Borat, was on, and he was so hilarious. And the G factor of the Today Show, the PG factor, was a movie we were dying to see because he was funny and it was clever and hilarious. But if you remember Borat, it actually is quite naughty. Very naughty. And it was a beautiful main day, a day we would never go to the movies. You know, we wouldn't waste it indoors. But we were laughing so hysterically that we said, let's go to the movies. And then about halfway through, and I'm not sure, I can't repeat some of the things that happened on this podcast, but if you remember, it was quite provocative. And so my grandfather, my gentleman grandfather, and I were sitting there like, what do we do? Do we go? Do we stay? What do we do? But he had a great sense of humor and we waited it out. I'm sure the Secret Service were like, what are these people doing?
Okay, well, you'll appreciate this, Jenna, being 38. I had a similar major faux pas with my dad. In 1998, we went to see There's Something About Mary in the movie.
Oh my gosh.
And I love Cameron Diaz, but nobody told me this is not a movie you go with to your dad.
Oh my gosh, hilarious.
Yeah. So friends, let's help each other when we're
we need a
seeing
code.
Movies. Yes, let's share recommendations.
Do not see something, 50 Shades of Grey with your parents. I'll just put it out there. I haven't done it, but I would say don't watch any of that trilogy with your family.
Yes.
Well, this book is full of both funny and you're going to have tears for sure. But I swear, I think we would be fast friends with the Bush girls. I'm convinced, Laura Beth, because there's just so many parts that I saw us. I laughed so hard that you guys gave these personal, stories to your cats.
Oh yeah.
Human person.
Well, we basically personified our cats. Cats aren't humans, but our cats are. And my cat Bernadette is like a 90-year-old, from somewhere, I think Jersey, I'm not exactly sure, but she's been smoking her whole life and she's got a really kind of raspy, that's Bernadette. And then Bob, my mom's cat, is an artist. He loves glitter. He likes to decorate things and feathers, and he really does. He loves feathers. But yeah, Barbara and I don't know why. I mean, we're kind of strange cat people. My mother loved cats, and her first cat was named Dewey after the Dewey Decimal System. And then we all followed suit. And that's very strange. I actually heard my daughter in a guitar lesson yesterday writing a song about Bernadette and Bob, our two families' cats right now. And I'm like, it continues, passing it on, the weird cat ladiness on to our kids, just like we should.
It made me laugh so hard. And I have to tell you, I agree with your mom in that you can tell the gentleness of a cat if they'll let you like a baby.
Yeah, hold it like a baby. And Bob, her cat was a barn cat that jumped into her arms like a baby and just held there. And that's how she decided to adopt him.
I've only had one that let me do that, but you'll appreciate this. I had the cat. She lived almost 24 years.
Wow.
And I named her Vedder after Eddie Vedder.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Pearl Jam, he would be thrilled.
That's right.
Well, why? I guess, I'm kind of curious. Obviously, you had this experience over this 1 year time span of losing some of these significant people in your life, Jenna. But why did you feel you wanted to write Everything Beautiful in its time right now?
Well, I wrote it a year ago now, but I think the reason why I wrote it is I really started writing for myself. I wrote the first letter in there that I wrote on the night when my grandmother Barbara died. I was all alone. My family, my husband Henry was in Texas. My sister was in Texas. My parents were obviously in Texas. And so I got the news and I put my girls to bed. And then I turned on the TV and it was filled with in memoriams. You know, when you lose somebody that's a public figure, you're grieving publicly, which is, of course, our Granny taught us how to do. But at first, some of those comments felt really raw because, of course, they were really talking about Barbara Bush as the politician's wife, not as our Granny, not as a human being, not as somebody who we knew so intimately. And so I, after a while, just compulsively watching the television and flipping from channel to channel, I turned it off and I started to write my own letter to her, one that of course she would never read. And I think anybody that's processing grief, writing is a beautiful way to do that. By the way, I wrote for myself. I didn't think this would be published. I'm not sure when I thought, oh, this should be more, because really it was journal entries and writing about losing my grandfather. And I think, at some point what I realized, and this is why the title is obviously from the Bible, Ecclesiastes, everything beautiful in its time. And what I realized is that even grief, even heartache, even losing people that you love so much that have been these transformational figures in your life can be beautiful, but you have to obviously get over the hurt. Sure. And so, I read Ecclesiastes at my grandmother Jenna's funeral, and I was like, yeah, that's it. Like, everything is made beautiful in time, and that patience and love and grace all come. And so I don't remember the moment where I was like, oh, let's publish this. Mm-hmm. But I really wrote for myself first.
Yeah. Yeah. That is
can be very healing.
Very healing. That's exactly what I was thinking. And I was going to ask you, but it sounds like you've just answered it about, since facing so much loss. And honestly, our culture really has a lot of fear around death, and losing loved ones, and just for ourselves. And so it sounds like your healing provision was doing some writings, and that helped you through that grief process. So we should also mention, since the writing of the book, that you have lost your beloved father-in-law. And
yes,
man, I loved his story in the book. I did not know his story before reading it in your book, but powerful testimony of just his life and adversity he faced. But man, I would call him a steel magnolia as well. Just a rock solid guy.
Yes.
All right.
Well, I am curious. I loved in the book how you included the rules at the back door, and even your Gampy's rules of living as well. Do you feel like our generation has sage advice that we're passing on? And are there any particular rules that you think need to go by your back door?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think anything that's come before, we continue the things that, and then the things that we didn't feel like worked, we're not continuing. I mean, of course, I feel like we're creating, all of us, Hoda and I talk a lot about how you can't really control what happens to your kids outside the walls of your home, right? You can't know what's going to happen to them on the bus ride, or they're going to face when they get to school. Or, I mean, I guess now a lot of people aren't even going to school, but in general, we can't control our kids' interactions, but we can control how they feel in the home. And although I do have many memories of my grandparents, which I write about in this book, what I remember most is the feeling of being with them. I remember sitting at that oval baby blue table and in Maine with my grandparents, next to each other, them holding each other's hands, the laughter and the way a big family, the noise of a big family. Like, I remember the joy of that. And the thing is, it's really in some ways up to us as parents to create that atmosphere where people can feel safe and be joyful. And I know for a fact, I don't know if I always do a perfect job, and I'm sure they would say that they didn't always do a perfect job too. But the overall feeling of being in both of my grandparents' house were ones of joy, of feeling safe and comforted. And actually, my grandpa Harold had the best catchphrase when we were staying in Midland. And really, Jenna and Harold from Midland, Texas, West Texas, were really more a part of our day-to-day. We saw them a lot because we lived in Midland until we were 5. And then, we spent so much time with them. And so I think what he would do was such a gift. If any of us, if Barbara or I spilt milk, or dropped our plate on the ground, or got things messy, which kids will do, he would yell, "Happy days." And I love that, because what it did in 2 words was to let us all know that this was going to be an environment where we weren't going to sweat the small stuff, that like spilling and making a mess and being a kid was okay. And I I think really, and I don't know, but I've thought about this a lot, that both of my grandfathers were in World War II. Both of them, my grandfather Harold liberated a concentration camp, and Barbara and I found the pictures of these bodies on top of bodies. And I think that generation was like, we're not going to waste time. We've seen horrific horrors. We've seen the worst of humanity. So little things like spilling milk aren't going to be the things that we get worried about. Yeah. So for me, I mean, and these aren't rules necessarily, but this is like a mantra or a feeling. And I think that's almost as important as rules. But the atmosphere in my house, I hope, and I'm working towards this, it isn't always for sure. And it really depends about day by day, because we're tired. And I think particularly right now, all of us have been at home with the same people. We're exhausted. We're working from home. We're making meals. We're doing all of these things that exhaust us. And when we're exhausted, or at least I know when I'm exhausted, I'm not my best self. Yeah. But what I want, and what what I'm striving for every single day, is to create a house with, full of joy, a house where kids can be kids, where there's laughter and love. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I think all of us strive to do, but I work on it every single day.
Yeah. Well, just even listening to you talk, I'm just remembering page after page of stories. And I can wholeheartedly tell our listeners that you will be blessed by this book. Your children will be blessed by this book. Elders in your family will be blessed by this book. And I saw today is 100 days till Christmas.
Yes.
So it's time, y'all. Go ahead and start getting the Christmas gifts list. And this should be on it. Jenna, we, as you know, we're a Southern podcast, so we can't let you go without asking you a few Southern questions. Sure. As a Texas girl. So Lainey, you want to kick us off with a couple of?
I was just curious, when your dad was at the White House, did they ever do Southern cooking in the White House?
Well, yeah, of course. But particularly, and listen, I'm a proud Texan. Tex-Mex. We had their Tex-Mex. Mm-hmm. I will never forget how delicious the Tex-Mex was. But yeah, fried chicken and biscuits, and I mean, definitely there was a combination of food. But yeah, Southern food was in the mix for sure.
What is one place that you want people to know about? Maybe in Midland in Texas, or something in the South?
West Texas, if y'all have not been there, is so beautiful. And when my husband and I were dating, we did a road trip from Midland, Texas. We flew into Midland and we drove all the way to Portland, Oregon. But our time driving from Midland through West Texas, through Marfa, and Pecos, and all of these adorable little towns, was El Paso, where my grandmother's from, was really beautiful. So if you can get out to West Texas, the Gage Hotel is this incredible place. Marfa is so wonderful. There's so much art and history. The film Giant, the old Western, was filmed in Marfa. There's an old El Paso, the old hotel. We stayed in it. We also camped out. Big Bend National Park is just beautiful and like nothing you've ever seen. So I think the time in West Texas was growing up was really instrumental for who we are and how we are. But it's never too late to visit there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good.
Is there any place you can get good Southern food in New York City?
Oh, of course. My new thing, by the way, is to order food from South Carolina. I just had some delicious barbecue from Lawrence's Barbecue, and then Callie's Biscuits, and you can just order it. It comes to you. They do we ate such great meat over Labor Day. Callie's Biscuits, their pimento cheese is incredible. Caroline's Cakes. There's also this incredible pie maker called, I think, the Southern Pie Lady. There's all these great places. And for Henry and I, not only are we hoping to support our local restaurants in New York City, but also support all these local businesses because they need it, and also we want nostalgia right now, or I do. I'm craving it. And there's no better way than to eat the food that you grew up on.
Yes. Those are awesome recommendations. I'm going to look into a lot of those.
Please do.
Well, for those of you that are just dying to get the book and feeling lucky, I want to let you know that we are doing a book giveaway this week on our Instagram. So at Steel Magnolias Podcast, you'll see the giveaway. And this is fun. we asked our friends at Rifle Paper Company to also
I love
give away, they're giving away a stationery set for us to encourage letter writing.
Yeah, they did my first Christmas card with when I was pregnant with Mila. They did a little cartoon of Henry and I together and like a little baby. It was also our baby announcement. Mila was born in April, and our Christmas card was our little baby announcement that we were
awesome. Well, they have a gorgeous card set and stationery set and pen, and just, it's beautiful. So we'll put that with the book for a lucky winner on our Instagram this week. So Lainey, why don't you take us out with our sign off?
Jenna, peace be with you.
And also with y'all. Thank you so much for having me.